Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic. The 2020-2021 Western Saharan clashes, also called the Guerguerat crisis and Moroccan military intervention in Guerguerat, is an armed conflict between Morocco and the self-proclaimed Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic, represented at the United Nations by the Polisario Front, in the disputed region of Western Sahara. It was the latest escalation of an unresolved conflict over the region, which is largely occupied by Morocco, but 20 to 25% of which it is administered by the Sadr. The violence ended a ceasefire between the opposing sides that had held for 29 years in anticipation of referendum on self-determination that would have settled the dispute. Despite the establishment of the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara in 1991, the referendum was never held. Tensions between Morocco and the Polisario Front deepened in mid-October 2020 when Sahrawi protesters blocked a controversial road connecting Morocco to sub-Saharan Africa. The protesters camped on the road near the small village of Guerguerat, where it passes through a 5-kilometer-wide buffer strip monitored by the UN. Despite the controversy, the route had grown in economic importance, such that the protest stranded about 200 Moroccan truck drivers on the Mauritanian side of the border. According to the Sahrawi authorities, the Moroccan forces were deployed near the area in early November, with Mauritanian forces reinforcing their positions along its border with Morocco, which is controlled by the Polisario Front. On the 13th of November, Morocco launched a military operation from the berm into the demilitarized buffer strip of Western Sahara to clear the protesters near Guerguerat and restore the free movement of goods and people. The Polisario Front urged the United Nations to intervene, noting that the Moroccan military operation violated the ceasefire agreements of the 1990s, and furthermore accused the Moroccan security forces of shooting at unarmed civilians in the buffer strip. Morocco denied there had been any armed clashes between the sides and said the truce remained in place, while Sadr authorities declared the ceasefire over. Clashes spread that same day along the Moroccan berm, with Morocco claiming that it had repelled a Sahrawi incursion near Al-Mabs. The Sadr declared war on Morocco the next day. Since the beginning of the conflict, both countries have begun mass mobilization and the Sadr Ministry of Defense claims to be bombarding military objectives along the Moroccan berm daily. It is the first major clash over the region since 1991. The disputed region Western Sahara is a sparsely populated area mostly comprising desert territories, situated in the Maghreb region of Africa's northwest coast. The region was a Spanish colony until February 1976, when the Spanish government informed the United Nations that it withdrew from the territory. Since then, the region has been the subject of a long-running territorial dispute between Morocco, supported by a number of its prominent Arab allies, including Saudi Arabia and Jordan, and the Sahrawi Republic, an African Union member state established by the Algerian-backed pro-independence Polisario Front, which is recognized by the United Nations as the legitimate representative of the indigenous Sahrawi people. Some commentators have connected Morocco's interests over the region with the idea of Greater Morocco, which encompasses Western Sahara and parts of both Mauritania, Mali, and Algeria, and according to the narrative, was divided up by the French and Spanish colonizers. Morocco, claiming Tindouf and Béchar provinces, invaded Algeria in 1963, resulting in the brief Sand War, which ended in a military stalemate, while the Polisario Front had waged a low-intensity war of national liberation against Spanish colonial authorities since May 1973. The Western Sahara War began in October 1975, just weeks before the death of longtime Spanish dictator Francisco Franco, when Moroccan and Mauritanian forces, aided by France, invaded the Spanish colony, while Mauritania withdrew from Western Sahara and recognized the Sahrawi Republic early in the conflict. By the end of the war, Morocco had obtained control of more than two-thirds of the vast desert territory in its western part, along the Atlantic Ocean. During the war, between 1980 and 1987, Morocco built 6 mostly sand barriers some 2,700 kilometers long. And in 1988, both Morocco and the Polisario Front agreed to a UN settlement plan, approved by the UN Security Council on 29 April 1991, called for a referendum, which would ask the Sahrawis to choose between independence or integration into Morocco, to be organized and conducted by the United Nations Mission for the Referendum in Western Sahara. After the war, on 6 September 1991, an UN-brokered ceasefire was signed, promising a referendum on self-determination to the Sahrawis. The United Nations has recognizing the area as a non-self-governing territory.